Hi, I'm Carla with Race to Walk, and this is just an update. So, if this is going to be, I'm going to be talking about stolen elections, and it's not necessarily about the one that just happened. But if this looks a little bit different, this is because it is. I am actually, I think I mentioned a couple times in the live streams that StreamYard, which I've used for several years to live stream, they changed. I don't even know. Crud. Okay, I do have volume. Didn't even test that. This is the thing. I've been using StreamYard. They basically, they got bought out. They doubled their price, and I'm trying to decide if the things that they have, I don't know. I'm trying to decide if it's worth it. So right now I'm streaming with EV Mux. I'm not even sure that's how to say it. It has some cool things, but it's a lot different. So anyway, what I'm going to be going over today, and I can't even, I have all my overlays, and this is like totally different. I'm sorry. This is throwing me a little bit. Okay, I did this all. I did. And I even had a list, and I don't know about this. Anyway, so we're going to be talking about stolen elections, and I'm not talking. I'm going to talk a little bit about the one that just happened, but mainly, if you know me personally, and if you followed any of my stuff for at any time at all, you probably heard me talk about our shady school board, and I just realized not too long ago that that is part of the reason that I started to get targeted is by some of the things that I was saying about them, different reasons. So anyway, what I've been doing in this, I have on my website, I have let me see if I can figure out how to do this. I have this thing called, it's a, sorry. Oh my gosh, it's not even on here. Darn it. I'm sorry. I did have this all planned out, but, oh, here it is. So I have an update. I started doing this in August. I started doing some updates about what was going on, and it because I had been hacked since the beginning of the year. I was trying to figure it out. It was really aggravating me because it was interfering in my ability to help the Afghans, just basically do anything. And so I started doing updates the beginning of August, and that was really at that point I really didn't know a lot of what was going on. I just knew that I had been hacked, and I could tell like what some of the I didn't know everybody that was involved. I still don't know everybody, but I know quite a few people. And so anyway, I started with that, and then over the past few months, I've discovered more people. I've put together some of the connections of things. So anyway, if you want to go and read that or see any of the other updates I've been doing since August, you can just go to my website at racetowalk.org, hacked the saga with dashes between the words, and you can read the rest of that. So anyway, but what kind of started, I realized that that some of the things I had talked about that were, I don't really consider them like all that political, but I guess some people thought it was. These are some of the posts that I wrote that people took exception to, I guess, and that have been targeted. So one of them is on election faith and parties. I wrote this back in 2018. Nothing too dramatic. I just said that you don't have to be voting Republican doesn't make you a Christian. That's basically the long and short of it. That's been targeted. And then I also, this is another thing that I can tell like really bugs people is oh shoot, just a second. Let me just do this. Let me just add. Oh, sorry. This is just different, and this is the thing. I will say this. I'm going to have to give some feedback to EVMux. Some of the settings, like the things I set up, don't save, and I had already added these to this particular scene, and they aren't here. So that's part of the reason that's throwing me a little bit. But anyway, they had. This is another thing that I wrote, and this was, it's called Just Trust Us. This was basically a voter information overview of what had been going on with the school board. And so that just kind of gave an overview. I can tell people get like worked up about that. When I do screenshots from it on Twitter, it gets deleted. I mean, it's just a bunch of weird things. It's like, I know this is going to sound like completely uh, outrageous to people, but if you don't want to get called out, then don't stop doing shady things. Stop doing shady things, and then you don't have to worry about what other people say, right? If you are doing right by people, then what people are saying about you will be good things. Imagine that. Imagine that. Imagine not having to worry about what Carla Alvarez has to say about you. Oh my gosh. You could actually get a life. Imagine that. So anyway, all this started, like this part of it started back in 2016. Um, they, our school board, you can go read the whole thing. I'm not going to get into it. Basically hired a superintendent, Elizabeth Fagan, that nobody wanted. Huge amount of protests. If you go to I have a link in the description of the video of the page on my site. It's published. I have some of the links there, not all of it, but you can kind of see the drama. I mean, she literally, like, wherever she goes, she has a lot of drama. I mean, she actually, people who know her, no, I mean, this is just true. This is not like, I'm not making this up. I've had two people that know her, that like her, that consider her a friend, that call her radioactive. Okay, but this is who our school board hired. All right, so there's this huge protest against it, and then after that, I mean, they did what they wanted; they didn't care. And so after that, a lot of us started researching because I was like, but I said this in that post on election, faith, and parties before this all happened. I never questioned anything that they did. I didn't know any of the school board members, but I knew people that knew them. And I was like, okay, well, I know people and, they think they're cool. And so, I'm sure that they're fine. They weren't. They weren't. So anyway, started reading a bunch of things after this all went up. The district where she was before, which is Douglas County in Colorado, a lot of their residents and parents came and were telling us, yeah, it's bad. You need to buckle up and you need to educate yourself about what is going on. One of those people actually happened to be a man named Brian Malone, who had created, so he has two documentaries. This is one of the things I think is kind of interesting. If you go, the first one that he did was one that was called The Reformers. If you can find that now, let me know. I cannot find it anywhere. And that was specifically about Elizabeth Fagan and Douglas County ISD. Education Inc. is about it's basically about the industry of education and how there's a lot of money in education and people don't really care about kids. They just, when you have hedge funds in charge of education, it's probably not a good thing. But they do see like charters as a great growth industry. Anyway, so we were educating ourselves, figuring out what was going on. And the next year, in 2017, was an election. So before, there hadn't really been a lot of participation in the elections as far as a lot of candidates, but they had really offended people, insulted people that questioned them. And so what happened, there were quite a few people that ran for the school board. And this is something where the most people that had voted in that school board before this was 3,000 people. And this at the time they had about 115,000 voters in that district. So, you're thinking school board, not very many people vote, you print it, you get some signs, put them out, go talk and have, tea and cookies at some community center, some homeowners associations and, different things around the community. No, it turned into an all out brawl. Again, I'm not going to get into that, but it got really nasty. And there was somebody that was there that was basically, his gig is I'm trying to think of the name for him, is riling up, getting people offended, and basically far right, Tea Party, James Lennon. That's basically what he does. And so anyway, he was out and he was campaigning for the incumbents, the people we thought were complete snakes, or I thought was complete snakes, and every single day of early voting, and it got super nasty. It was just like just a bunch of weird things that was going on. And I've mentioned before that when I was doing, I wasn't a candidate. I was just a parent that was saying my opinion and fact checking um, board members and their supporters when they were putting out stuff that was not true or sometimes straight up propaganda. And there were a lot of things that happened to me that knowing what I know now, I believe that it was the things that happened to me, like my phone being hacked, I think my laptop was too. Somebody tried to break into our apartment. My car was sabotaged. All of this, I think it was connected. And part of the reason that we were very against Elizabeth Fagan coming in is because we were positive that she was coming in to implement vouchers in the school. Board insisted no, that they weren't for it, that she wasn't, that she would do whatever they told her to. This is what they said. Well, that is the big fight in Texas right now in the state legislature. Greg Abbott is trying to shove vouchers down the forced vouchers on the Texas legislature. They voted down multiple times, and he is basically holding funding for schools hostage if the legislature doesn't pass it. So anyway, everything that we were saying about her and more has, when we were protesting her appointment or her hiring, has turned out to be true. So anyway, but going back to that election, one of the people that was running was a guy named Bob Rehack, and he had been in the community for decades. I mean, when I first moved there in 2002, like I knew who he was because he was always doing things in the community, and he's just salt of the earth kind of person. Amazing reputation. Everybody likes Bob. And the thing about the person he was running against, Robert Sitton, he's on a lot of things, but like a lot of groups. But I've been told that people that are consider themselves or call themselves friends will put his sign in their yard, but then vote for somebody else in the election. But they won't say anything because what I was told, these people feel, is that he has all these connections with the chamber. The school board is one of the largest money spenders in the district. Their annual budget, not even talking about the bonds that we won't even get into that, but it's almost $500 million just in, annual operating budget. And they just feel like it's, they'd be retaliated against if like he knew that they didn't vote for him. And which isn't a good, that's not good, but that's what I was told. Anyway, but so these are the dynamics. So there's all this crazy stuff going on, and there's all this outside money coming into dark money in this little school board election. Like, seriously, like, what's the big deal about it? And so there's just all this weird stuff going on, and there's it had been really hostile and really nasty, and then there was kind of like this lull when after the early voting closed, and it was kind of calm, and then all of a sudden on the Friday before election day, all hell broke loose. One of the candidates was like flipping out, making false accusations against one. She was aligned with the incumbents. She was making false accusations against one of her opponents. The Breitbart did a smear campaign on some people in the district. Texas Right to Life started doing robocalls. There were postcards just blank. I mean, it was just like over the top. It's like, what the heck is going on? There was a lot of stuff it was just overall over the top. So anyway, election day that night, I was out at one of the polls, And when it closed, I walked in. This is the thing, I hadn't done anything with elections before, so I was just thinking, if there's something weird going on, I want to see if I kind of want to be there so I can just see the dynamics of what's going on. The thing is, I'd never been involved before, so even if something was going on right in front of me, I don't know if I would have known. But anyway, we go somewhere afterwards and to wait for the account. And keep in mind, let me see, I wasn't going to do the polls yet, but I'll show you. I'll show you what it was. So if any of you, oh my gosh, are familiar with the Humble area, this is where the polls were. It's the little stars are where the polls are. And if you're going to be looking at that and saying, yeah, there's hardly like any coverage at all in Summer Creek, yes, you would be right. That is what basically trying to prevent voting by manipulating notifications or voting locations. That's what it looks like. So anyway, but yeah, that was the polls. So, but there are only 6 of them, right? And the furthest location from one to the other was probably about 20 minutes. It was actually Kingwood. They counted it at the Humble ISD admin building. And when I told somebody who's heavily involved in Harris County elections, she's like, "No, that didn't happen." And I said, "Yes, yes, it did. They counted the votes at the administration building." She's like, "That's not supposed to happen." I'm like, "Well, it did. It's supposed to be counted at central count." Not only did Humble count their own ballots, they counted somebody else's. So they were basically running like this alternate elections, department or whatever, apart from Harris County Central Counts. That was the year, and I don't know like what else they were counting, but they were saying, "Oh, we're combining resources," and they were counting the votes for another location. And I talked to somebody afterwards that was there that night, and she said, "Well, they knew pretty fast what who won. Like the votes for Humble came in quickly, and they knew pretty close right away. But they had to wait a long time for whatever else they were counting, and she didn't know where they were coming from. But even then, it wasn't a secret. Everybody knew. So anyway, I will just say I don't know what other races that Humble tallied, but I do know that that was the year that the Justice Department was at overseeing elections in Pasadena because of it was they've been restricting minority voters anyway. So afterwards, I walk in, to where we're waiting for the results, and somebody said, like, there's so few votes. There's so few votes, and that there was like a $700 vote difference between like Sitton and Bob, and so it was like that may not seem like a lot, but when you have so few people voting, then it is, because you know that whatever's coming in is probably not going to overcome that difference. And so anyway, then Bob comes in a little bit later and he's like, "Well, we won Kingwood Middle School." I was like, "Oh, okay." And so anyway, we're sitting there waiting, and the first result came in. It was like at 12%, so one poll. And then we sat there and waited. Again, it was for a while. And Bob's like, "How can you be sitting at 12% for like, over an hour when there's only 6 polls? I mean, that's ridiculous." So anyway, long story short, Sitton won, Bob didn't. But I was like, that is just bizarre to me. Because what was weird to me is that when you looked at the totals, so it was the incumbents and Martina Dixon that were running together as a slate, and then there were the challengers. There were 4 challengers that were running together, and the 3 that only had one main other candidate that they were against, like Bob, Abby Whitmire, and Chris Herron, there was only like 100 votes between them. And this is what's weird to me. Like Bob has been in the area for, like, people know him, but it didn't seem to make any difference in the votes. That was just weird. That seemed really weird to me. And it also seemed weird to me that Martina got, there's a 7-way race, and nobody knew who she was before that. I mean, the board knew who she was, but nobody else did. I saw a couple signs around Kingwood, like hardly any. I mean, I was like, how did she get 45% of the vote? This just didn't make sense to me. So anyway, I was like, I don't believe this. And so somebody was like, oh, you can request the tapes to compare them, if after with a Freedom of Information request. So I didn't do it right away. Stan Sander was the the county clerk. Anyway, he was over elections. And I knew he was a big Tea Party person. I was like, I don't even want them knowing that I'm looking into this, because I seriously, they're in shady. Like anything to do with the Tea Party is like, I just think it's shady. So anyway, I waited until Diane Troutman won, and I ordered I requested the tapes, and I got a copy of them. So if you remember, um, at the time, this is back in 2017, the Harris, all of Harris County, and Humboldt was using this too, used these, they were called E-slates by Hart. They were manufactured by Hart InterCivic. And if you remember, they had those little, you had to turn the ballot to do that, to do it. And then it would feed into, I couldn't find a picture of this. So there would be this row of these E-slates, right? And then each row or bank would feed into what they called a JBC, or Judge's Ballot Controller. And that would tally the votes. So once it was over, like this is what they call a, let me see if I can find it. Oh, okay. So this is what they call a DRE system, or direct recording. What is it? Direct recording electronic voting system. And so what that means is that there is no, each individual voter doesn't get their own ballot. What they get is that it's just going directly into the machine, and then it would basically be tabulated on those boxes, those JBCs. And so after it was over, the people that were running the poll would print out a tape. It'd be this real long tape, and for every race, it would give you the raw numbers of, who it was either for or against, or for different candidates, and each tape had different colors. And so, what happened with that, and then they print out 3, and so each the precinct judge and the alternate judge would each keep. They would print out 3. They would all sign them, and then each of the judges that were running that poll would keep a copy of the tape, and then they sent one to Central Harris County. They would keep a copy of that. They were supposed to keep it for 7 years, and that's supposed to be for verification. So that's really the only verification, is once it prints out on the tape, then you can say, okay, what printed out on the tape is right. But as a friend of mine said, there was no certification or any sort of validation of the code itself on the E-slates or the JBCs. So it really wasn't so much about the poll, but was questioning was how secure is what's being recorded on the tape, if that makes sense. And I'll have on my website, I'll have links to people that had a lot of concerns. There's been research on that. Actually, really not that secure. So when I got the tapes, took them back, went to a friend. We went over them and compared to what was reported, and what was matching on the tapes actually was what was on the that was reported by Harris County and Humboldt. But then when I looked, and when we were going through precinct by precinct, my friend said, who had been involved in elections for a long time, said, well, this is odd. And she said, and I said, what? She's like, well, normally if you're at a location that sometimes there'll be more people voting on a particular row that would tally to a particular, JBC, the box, than the other. you try to balance them, but sometimes there's more than the other. But the percentage of the votes for a particular candidate or a particular ballot measure, those usually ran pretty close to the same, and that was not what we saw on those tapes. So what we saw, and I got the copy of the tapes, and I wrote down, like, and highlighted the things, the parts that really seemed odd. And where'd that go? Darn it. I'm sorry. This is just not. This is annoying. I don't like this as well as the other. I can't even find it. I'll have to put it in on the article. It is literally not here. It says it's added, but it's not. But I have a picture of the tapes so you can see it. But what we saw, and it was especially obvious in Martina's race, where there were 7 candidates that were running. And she said on one tape, one of the others of the candidates was usually ahead. I can't remember one where Martina was ahead on, like, the one tape list. I can't remember which one it was, but let's just call it the white tape. Cannot remember one. Like Lohit Dadabarua, who actually just passed away recently, is just like right day before the election. But he had been volunteering quite a bit in Summer Creek. A lot of people knew him. So in those polls voting there, he would be way ahead on one tape, but then it would be flipped on the other, and Martina was ahead. Same thing with Dr. Panzarella. I mean, his family, let me see if I can get this one there. His family has been in the Humble area it's not going, for years. I mean, like decades, like 3-4 generations of Panzarellas have been in, like, the Humble area. On the white tape, he literally smoked everybody else. On the pink one, it was Martinez. It's just completely flipped. And it was like that on every poll. And it was like, this is not right. But we checked the, with the tapes in Harris County. So what that told me is that there had to have been something in the code itself that, like, before it got to the tape, something had to have been hacked. So here's the thing. That's the other thing. Let me see if I can get this one on here. I don't know if it's going to come on, but I do have. If I can't get it on the live stream, yeah, it's already added. Okay. So here's the thing. One of the things that changed in 2020 is that they started to get away from those DRE, those direct recording electronics. They tried to get away from it. And if you remember, I have a link to the article on my website, but Chris Krebs, who was in charge of election security in 2020, said that 95% of the elections had paper ballots. You do not have that with DRE systems. And so you can confirm, like, if you have questions about what a tally says, you can confirm it to the paper ballot, right? So here's the thing. One of the things that has been happening to me lately is that there's a lot of things online that are fake. If you go back on that Hack the Saga page on my website, you can see a lot of them. I've had watch time stolen on YouTube, views, things wiped and erased. I've had it looks like 3 different, my Google search and Google Analytics has drastically changed like 3 times. Like, somebody's going in and, like, constructing an alternate view of the traffic of my site, Raise to Walk. I'm not going to get into why that's a big deal, but anyway, I've had massive sabotage on that. I've had things like passwords changed on platforms. Here's the thing. Anything that's online and digital, it doesn't even have to be online. It can be hacked. It can be manipulated. And so just because something says something online does not mean that's a true picture of reality. When I was researching the what was going on with Rushing's resignation. I was looking up the House transfer, like when, if you were in Hubble, that was a huge drama. He didn't announce his resignation from the board until it was too late to put that seat on the ballot, and then he moved right away. Well, he'd already made an offer on that house over in full shares way before the deadline. He knew he was moving. That's what it looks like to me. But there was weird stuff in the things that were recorded online as far as dates did not match the actual documents. I've had that happen on other things. Somebody was had some questions about somebody. I did massive because they were harassing me. I'm like, this, I cannot be the only one this has happened to, but I couldn't find anything online. I just happened to do an exact search on their name, and something came up about an agency action on something that they were licensed for. And when I looked up their license on that agency site, what was listed on the main screen of his account said that he had basically given back his license, like it was voluntary, like he chose to do that. But when I looked at the actual documents that were attached to it, he had been permanently suspended, and it was because he had basically inappropriate touching, is basically a creepy predator. But that's not, you would never know that unless if you went and actually looked at the document. So what I am saying is anything can be faked. Anything can be faked. And what I will say that gives me a lot of questioning about this last election is go look at Ted Cruz's results. You compare according to these polls, Ted Cruz had more people vote for him in 2024 than he did in 2018. And keep in mind that this 2018 was before he let me see if I can find it. I had a picture of his dog. Remember when he left Snowflake at home? When he went off to Cancun? Do you remember this? So this is before he was getting booed at parades in Texas. He can't even basically even come to Houston where he lives because, people hate him. So you're telling me that Ted Cruz got more votes in 2024 than he did in 2020. And the other thing, the results look completely shady. It's way too even. He should not, it's not, people are not that uniform about how they vote in different areas. They're just not. This is the other thing. I was a solid Republican voter up until 2016, our shady school board, and I still would have voted for some after that. I'm not at that point now. But people who cross party lines, we don't do it because we think that this person, the other, for Republicans and Democrats are like, oh yeah, they're great. I mean, sometimes some people maybe that's what it is, but most of the time when you're crossing the lines is because we're voting against the candidate that our party has put up, and we're saying we're not voting for this jackass. I don't care we're not voting until you bring us somebody better. That's why people cross party lines. So it's not a difference between Beto and Allred. It's freaking Ted Cruz. Nobody likes him. So don't tell me those results are real. I don't believe them. So this is the other thing. Frank Strong is I'm going to have to go in a couple minutes, but Frank Strong is somebody, he's in Texas. He's been, he's on Substack, but he publishes a lot of things about, public education, primarily about books. Like he basically kind of does a voter guide for school boards about how pro libraries of books they are, because that's actually a question in Texas. So he said that the pro books and pro librarians, the school board candidates did well. The book banners didn't. Okay, book banners are Ted Cruz's bread and butter. So if The book banner school board candidates didn't do well, but supposedly Ted Cruz, that doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't make sense. So what I'm saying is if you were a candidate and you're like, what? When the vote's certified, go ask for, count the ballots. The last person that ran against Robert Sitton was Rebecca Trudeau. I told her that because they had paper ballots at that point. So you can go and you can watch the certification. Go and see if it makes sense to you. Go and see if there's anything that raises a question. So here's the thing. Like I said, you go and you watch any of those things, the amount of hacking and the amount of manipulation. This literally just happened yesterday. I had somebody, they hacked my Cloudflare account, and this is the thing, super dumb, because them doing that basically connected dots. So I know what the motivation is so dumb. It was so unbelievably dumb. I can't even tell you that they did that. But what they did is they changed the IP addresses on the DNS servers. They sabotaged some of the verifications for my email so it wouldn't get delivered or wouldn't go through or things like that. So my site wouldn't load. It's just like little things. This is the type of crap they do. And I'm telling you, the people, it's political. So if they're doing this kind of stuff to me, right? And I'm just a third grade Sunday school teacher. Like, I'm just teaching Bible studies. What do you think they're doing if they can hack the vote? Because they've been hacking a whole lot of my stuff. So anyway, that's my advice to you. If you were a candidate, I would ask to confirm the count. That's what I would do. And I actually, like the day before the election, I was the Bulwark or whatever. They were saying this judge in Georgia wanted to do a hand count, and somebody stopped him. And I'm thinking, what was going on that he felt that was necessary? There had to have been a reason that prompted that. So anyway, always verify, and not just online. Actually look at the source document and see if what is online and reported actually matches the physical document, right? Because I'm telling you, many, 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 many times, it does not. And when you're talking about lying manipulators, most of the time it doesn't. So anyway, that's it for today. And I hope you all have a great weekend. And I hope this one, okay, I don't know. I'm going to experiment a little bit more with this platform, but right now, I don't know. Maybe I just have to get used to it. But anyway, I hope you have a great weekend. Talk to you soon.